He was about to propose. The ring was in his pocket. The cafe was perfect. And then his 12-year-old daughter looked up at him, eyes wet, voice cracking, and blurted, louder than she meant to, "Please don't." The entire cafe went silent. Forks stopped midair. Conversations died. Everyone turned to stare. Christopher stayed on one knee, staring at his daughter like she'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. His girlfriend, Tiffany, stood frozen, her face drained of color. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask why. She just looked at Lori, and for a split second she looked guilty. Then she turned and walked out. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Christopher rose slowly, still staring at the door. Then he turned to his daughter, trying to keep his voice steady. "Lori, what did you just do?" But Lori was shaking too hard to speak, and as Christopher reached into his pocket to steady himself, he felt nothing. The ring was gone. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Christopher stood there, frozen, as the cafe buzzed back to life around him. Whispers rippled through the room. A woman at the next table leaned toward her friend, eyes wide. Someone's phone was out, probably recording. Lori bolted. She shoved her chair back so hard it tipped over, then ran for the door, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Lori, wait!" Christopher called after her, but she was already gone. He turned back to the entrance where Tiffany had disappeared. Part of him wanted to chase her down, to explain what? That his daughter had just humiliated them both in front of strangers? That he had no idea why? He didn't even know where to start. The waiter approached, hesitant, holding the bill. "Sir, is everything okay?" Christopher forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, fine. Just give me a minute." He sat down heavily, pulling out his wallet. His hands were shaking. He could still feel the weight of everyone's stares, even though most people had gone back to their meals. The couple in the corner kept glancing over. The woman with the phone was still filming. He threw cash on the table, too much, but he didn't care, and stood to leave. That's when he reached into his pocket. His fingers found nothing but fabric. He froze, checked the other pocket, then his jacket. Then he dropped to his knees and searched the floor around the table, his heart pounding harder with every second. The ring box was gone. 3 months' salary. Custom band, the first thing he'd bought for himself, for them, in years. And now it was just gone. He stood slowly, scanning the cafe like someone might be holding it, waiting to return it. But no one approached. No one said a word. His mind raced. Did it fall when he knelt? Did Tiffany see it and take it? Did someone pocket it while he was distracted? He felt sick. The waiter returned, hovering awkwardly. "Sir, did you lose something?" "A ring box," Christopher said, his voice tight. "Small, black. Did you see it?" The waiter shook his head. "I'll check with the staff, but thanks." Christopher didn't wait for him to finish. He turned and walked out, chest tight, thoughts spiraling. Everything was falling apart. By the time Christopher got home, the house was dark except for the glow of Lori's bedroom light seeping under her door. He stood in the entryway for a long moment, keys still in his hand, trying to figure out what to say, what to feel. He was angry. That much he knew. But underneath the anger was something worse. Fear. The kind of fear that made his stomach twist and his hands go cold, because he'd seen that look on Lori's face before. 5 years ago, the night her mother left. Christopher walked into the living room and sank onto the couch. On the side table was a framed photo. Him, Lori, and his ex-wife, back when Lori was 7. They were at the beach. Lori was laughing, gap-toothed and sunburned. His ex had her arm around his waist. 2 months after that photo was taken, she was gone. No fight, no warning. Just a note on the kitchen counter that said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be a wife. Couldn't be a mother. Couldn't stay. Christopher had spent 5 years trying to convince Lori it wasn't her fault, that her mom leaving had nothing to do with her, that she was enough, that she was loved, and he'd spent 5 years trying to convince himself of the same thing. Then he met Tiffany. She was patient, kind. She didn't push. She let Lori set the pace. And for the first time in years, Christopher let himself believe that maybe, they could be whole again. Until tonight. He set the photo down and rubbed his face with both hands. From down the hall, he heard it. Quiet, muffled, but unmistakable. Lori was crying. Christopher stood outside, her door for a full minute before knocking. Lori? Silence. Can I come in? More silence. Then finally, a small voice. Okay. He opened the door slowly. Lori was curled up on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, face red and blotchy. She didn't look at him. Christopher sat on the edge of the bed, keeping his distance. He wanted to yell. He wanted to demand answers. But the way she was shaking, the way she looked so small, stopped him. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for snapping at you back there. That wasn't fair. Lori didn't respond. But I need you to talk to me, Lori. I need to understand what just happened. She wiped her nose with her sleeve, still not looking at him. You're going to hate me. I could never hate you. You will. Christopher's chest tightened. Try me. Lori was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she whispered. I heard her say something. Christopher's pulse quickened. Tiffany? Lori nodded. What did she say? Lori hesitated, her hands twisting the edge of her blanket. You're going to be mad at me. For what? For recording her. The words hung in the air. Christopher blinked. You recorded her? Lori nodded, guilt written all over her face. Lori, that's... He stopped himself, took a breath. That's not okay. You can't just record people without their permission. That's a violation of privacy. You understand that, right? I know, Lori said quickly, tears spilling over again. I know it was wrong. But I wasn't trying to be mean, Dad. I was trying to protect you. Christopher stared at her. Protect me from what? Lori didn't answer. She just reached under her pillow and pulled out a small voice recorder, the kind she used for school projects. She held it out to him, her hand trembling. Christopher took it slowly, his heart pounding. Just... Lori's voice cracked. Just listen. He pressed play. There was static at first, background noise. Then Tiffany's voice, faint but clear. I can't do this. I can't. And then the recording stopped. Christopher looked up sharply. That's it? Lori was staring at the floor, her whole body tense. Lori, play the rest. I don't want to. Play it. Dad, please. Play it. Lori's hands were shaking so hard she could barely press the button. But she did. The recording started again. Tiffany's voice. Quiet. Strained. I can't do this. I can't be a mom. The air left Christopher's lungs. He sat there, frozen, staring at the recorder in his hand like it was a grenade. I can't be a mom. The words echoed in his head, louder and louder, until they were the only thing he could hear. He thought of the last 5 years, of every time Lori asked when her mom was coming back, of every school event he attended alone, of every night he stayed up late wondering if he was doing enough. And now this. Lori was crying again, but Christopher barely heard her. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere darker. This was happening again. He was going to lose someone again. And Lori was going to be abandoned again. He replayed the audio, then again, and again. I can't be a mom. His hands were shaking now too. He looked at Lori. She was watching him with wide, terrified eyes, waiting for him to explode, waiting for him to tell her she'd ruined everything. But he couldn't speak, because she hadn't ruined anything. She just confirmed what he'd been too afraid to see. He set the recorder down on the bed, slowly, like it might shatter. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out at nothing. Dad? Lori's voice was barely a whisper. He didn't turn around. When did you record this? Last week. She was on the phone in the living room. I was coming downstairs and I heard her, and she sounded upset and Lori's voice broke. I didn't mean to spy, I swear. But then she said that and I got scared. Christopher closed his eyes. Scared of what? That she was going to leave. Like Mom. There it was. The wound he'd tried so hard to heal, ripped open again. His ex-wife had left on a Tuesday. No fight, no warning. He'd come home from work to find Lori sitting on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit, asking when Mommy was coming back. He'd spent 5 years making sure Lori knew it wasn't her fault. That some people just couldn't handle the weight of being a parent. That it had nothing to do with how much she was loved. But deep down, Christopher knew Lori didn't believe him. How could she? Her mother had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth staying for. And now Tiffany was about to do the same thing. He turned back to Lori. She looked so small, curled up on that bed, her face streaked with tears. You thought you were protecting me, he said quietly. Lori nodded. And you couldn't tell me before tonight? I tried, she said, her voice cracking. I kept trying to find the right time, but you were so happy and I didn't want to. She broke off, sobbing. I didn't want to hurt you. Christopher's chest ached. He crossed the room and sat back down on the bed, pulling Lori into his arms. She clung to him, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, he said softly. I know you are. But sorry didn't fix this. Christopher lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. The recorder was on his nightstand. He'd listened to it 3 more times after putting Lori to bed, hoping he'd missed something, hoping there was context that would make it less damning. But there wasn't. I can't be a mom. It was clear, final, irreversible. He thought about Tiffany, the way she'd looked at Lori in the cafe, not angry, but guilty, like she'd been caught. Had she been planning to leave all along? Was the proposal just going to speed up the timeline? Or had she been waiting for the right moment to tell him she couldn't do this anymore? Christopher grabbed his phone off the nightstand. He opened his messages. His last text to Tiffany was from this morning. Can't wait for tonight. I love you. She'd replied with a heart emoji. Now the conversation sat cold and unfinished. He started typing. We need to talk. Then deleted it. I heard what you said. Deleted that too. What was he supposed to say? My daughter recorded you and now I know the truth? He set the phone down and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe Lori had saved him from making the biggest mistake of his life. But God, it hurt. Because he'd been so sure, so certain that Tiffany was different, that she actually wanted this, wanted them. He'd let himself hope, and hope he was learning, was the most dangerous thing in the world. His phone buzzed. Christopher sat up, heart pounding. He grabbed it off the nightstand. It was a text from Tiffany. "We need to talk." He stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. Another text came through. "Please come with Lori." Christopher's breath caught. Why would she want Lori there? A third message appeared. "Bring the recorder." Christopher's pulse spiked. She knew. Somehow she knew. But how? Lori hadn't told her. He hadn't told her. So how? His mind raced, piecing it together. The cafe. Lori's outburst. Tiffany's face when she looked at her, not confused, but knowing. She'd figured it out. And now she wanted to confront them, both of them. Christopher's hands were shaking as he typed back. When? The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. I'll send you the address. Then nothing. Christopher sat there in the dark, staring at the messages, his chest tight. This was it. The conversation he'd been avoiding. The one where Tiffany would tell him, to his face, that she couldn't do this. That Lori was too much. That being a stepmom wasn't what she signed up for. He thought about ignoring the text, about blocking her number and moving on, about protecting Lori from hearing those words out loud. But he couldn't. Because as much as it was going to destroy him, Lori deserved to hear the truth. She deserved to know that this wasn't her fault, that Tiffany's decision had nothing to do with her worth, even if Christopher didn't believe that himself. The next morning, Christopher told Lori about the texts over breakfast. She went pale. She wants me there? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Lori pushed her cereal around her bowl, not eating. Is she going to yell at me? No, Christopher said firmly. She's not going to yell at you. Then what's she going to do? Christopher didn't have an answer for that. They drove in silence. Lori sat in the passenger seat, the recorder clutched in her lap like a lifeline. Christopher kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight. The address Tiffany had sent was for a park on the east side of town. Small, quiet, the kind of place people went to walk their dogs or sit on benches and think. When they pulled into the parking lot, Christopher saw her. Tiffany was sitting on a bench near the playground, her arms wrapped around herself. Even from a distance, he could tell she'd been crying. Lori saw her too. She stiffened. Dad, I don't want to do this. I know, Christopher said quietly. But we have to. He parked the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lori whispered, "What if she hates me?" Christopher looked at her. Really looked at her. His 12-year-old daughter who'd tried to protect him the only way she knew how. Who was terrified of being abandoned again. Who'd carried this secret alone because she thought it would save him. Then she's not worth it, he said. Lori blinked, surprised. Come on. Christopher opened the door. Let's get this over with. They walked toward the bench together. Tiffany stood when she saw them, her hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept. Hi, she said softly. Christopher nodded. Hi. Tiffany's gaze shifted to Lori. Hi, Lori. Lori didn't respond. She just stared at the ground. Tiffany's face crumpled a little, but she held it together. Thank you for coming. Christopher crossed his arms. You said you wanted to talk. I do? Tiffany took a shaky breath. But first, I need to know something. She looked at Lori. Why did you do it? Why did you stop the proposal? Lori didn't answer. Lori, Tiffany said gently, please, I need to understand. Lori's hands tightened around the recorder. Then finally she looked up, tears streaming down her face. Because I didn't want my dad to get hurt again. Tiffany's expression softened. Hurt by me? Lori nodded. Why would you think I'd hurt him? Christopher pulled the recorder out of his pocket and held it up. Because she heard this. He pressed play. Tiffany's voice filled the air, quiet and strained. I can't do this. I can't be a mom. Tiffany went completely still. Christopher stopped the recording. So if you're here to tell us you're done, just say it. Don't drag this out. Tiffany stared at him, her eyes wide. Then she looked at Lori, then back at Christopher. And then she said something he didn't expect. You heard the scariest part, not the truth. Christopher frowned. What? Tiffany's voice shook. That recording, it's real. I said that. But you don't know why I said it. You don't know what I meant. Then tell us, Christopher said, his voice hard. Tiffany shook her head. Not here. She looked at Lori. I need you to see something first, both of you. She stepped back, her expression pleading. Please, just follow me. Christopher hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, to take Lori and leave before this got worse. But Tiffany's eyes, red and desperate and honest, stopped him. Where are we going? He asked. Tiffany wiped her face with the back of her hand. Somewhere you'll understand. They followed Tiffany's car across town in silence. Lori sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Christopher kept his hands tight on the wheel, his mind racing. What could Tiffany possibly show them that would change what they'd heard? The recording was clear. She couldn't be a mom. What else was there to understand? After 15 minutes, Tiffany's car turned into a parking lot. Christopher followed, then stopped when he saw the building. It was a community center. Bright murals covered the walls. Handprints, rainbows, stick figure families. A banner out front read, Safe Haven Youth Program. Christopher frowned. What is this? Tiffany was already out of her car. She waited by the entrance, her arms wrapped around herself. Christopher and Lori got out slowly. As they approached, the front door burst open, and 3 kids came running out, none older than 10. Miss Tiffany, the smallest one shouted. Tiffany's face lit up. She crouched down as the kids crashed into her, all talking at once. You weren't here yesterday. Did you bring snacks? Can we finish the art project? Tiffany laughed, a real laugh, and hugged them. I missed you guys too. I'll be inside in a minute, okay? The kids nodded and ran back inside, their voices echoing down the hallway. Christopher stared. Lori's mouth was slightly open. Tiffany stood slowly, brushing off her jeans. She looked at them, her eyes still red but steady now. I volunteer here 3 days a week, have been for 2 years. Christopher didn't know what to say. These kids, Tiffany continued quietly, most of them have been through things no kid should go through. Neglect, abuse, parents who couldn't or wouldn't stay. They come here because it's safe, because people show up for them. She paused. I show up for them. Lori shifted beside Christopher, her grip on the recorder loosening. Tiffany took a breath. The recording you heard. I was on the phone with my therapist. I've been seeing her for months because I was terrified. Her voice cracked. Terrified of messing this up, of hurting you, of hurting Lori. Christopher's chest tightened. I wasn't saying I can't be a mom because I don't want to, Tiffany said, her eyes locked on his. I was saying I can't be a replacement mom. I can't walk into Lori's life and pretend her mother never existed. I can't erase her grief. I can't force myself into a role she didn't choose for me. She looked at Lori. That's what I meant. That's what scared me. Lori's face crumpled. I thought you were going to leave. Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. I know. And I'm so sorry you thought that. She crouched down so she was eye level with Lori. But I need you to hear me. I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you want me to. Lori's breath hitched. Tiffany reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. It was sealed, with Lori's name written across the front in careful handwriting. I wrote this before the proposal, Tiffany said, holding it out. I was going to give it to you after. Because I needed you to know that this wasn't just about me and your dad. It was about you too. Lori took the envelope with shaking hands. She looked at Christopher. He nodded. She opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten on soft blue paper. Lori read it silently, her lips moving slightly. Christopher watched her face shift, from confusion to surprise to something that looked like relief. When she finished, she looked up at Tiffany, tears streaming down her face. You really mean this? Every word, Tiffany said. Lori handed the letter to Christopher. He took it, his hands unsteady, and began to read. Dear Lori, I know you didn't ask for me to be in your life. I know I'm not your mom, and I never will be. I don't want to replace her. I don't want to make you call me Mom or pretend like she didn't matter. Your mom will always be your mom. And if you want to talk about her, I'll listen. If you want to cry about her, I'll sit with you. If you hate me sometimes because I'm here and she's not, I'll understand. I'm not here to take anything away from you. I'm here because I love your dad, and because I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. If I marry your dad, it won't be to become your mother. It'll be to become someone you can trust, someone who shows up, someone who stays. And if I ever have to leave, if something happens and I can't be in your life anymore, I promise you'll get a goodbye. You'll get an explanation. You'll never be left wondering why. You deserve that. Love, Tiffany. Because Christopher's throat tightened. He read it again, slower this time, letting the words sink in. This wasn't someone running. This wasn't someone making excuses. This was someone who'd thought about Lori's heart more carefully than he dared to hope. He looked up at Tiffany. She was watching him, vulnerable and open, waiting. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice rough. Because I didn't know how, Tiffany said. I didn't want you to think I was having second thoughts. I didn't want you to feel like I was making your daughter a problem. She's not a problem, Christopher. She's never been a problem. Her voice broke. I was just scared I'd screw this up. Christopher stepped forward. You should have told me. I know. I would have understood. I know. Tiffany wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the last 24 hours hanging between them. Then Christopher asked the question that had been eating at him since the cafe. Why did you leave? Yesterday. You didn't say anything. You just, walked out. Tiffany looked down. Because I saw Lori's face. And I realized she was terrified. Not angry, not jealous. Terrified. She looked back up at him. And I couldn't stand there and let you propose while she was breaking. It didn't feel right. It felt like I was winning something at her expense. Christopher's chest ached. And honestly, Tiffany's voice shook. I was humiliated. The whole cafe was staring. I panicked. I didn't know what to say, so I just left. Christopher nodded slowly. Then he remembered. The ring. Did you? Tiffany reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the small black box. Christopher stared. It fell when you stood up, Tiffany said quietly. The waiter saw it and gave it to me on my way out. I've been holding on to it ever since. She handed it to him. Christopher took it, his hands trembling slightly. He opened the box. The ring was still there, perfect and untouched. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath. 1 week later, Christopher stood in the living room, the ring box in his pocket again. But this time, there was no cafe, no crowd, no performance. Just him, Tiffany, and Lori. Tiffany sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous, hopeful. Lori stood beside Christopher, watching him carefully. He looked at his daughter first. Before I do this, I need to say something to you. Lori blinked, surprised. I'm sorry, Christopher said, for snapping at you, for not listening, for not seeing how scared you were. His voice wavered. You were trying to protect me, and I should have trusted that. Lori's eyes filled with tears. Your safety matters more than anything, Christopher continued. Your happiness matters. Your voice matters. And I promise, if you ever feel like something's wrong again, I'll listen. Okay? Lori nodded, wiping her eyes. Christopher turned to Tiffany. She was watching him, her expression soft. He took a breath. Then he knelt. But this time, he didn't pull out the ring right away. I need to ask you something first, he said. And I need an honest answer. Tiffany nodded. Can you love me and still protect Lori's heart? Tiffany's face crumpled. Yes. Can you stay even when it's hard? Yes. Can you promise her that she'll always have a voice in this family? Tiffany looked at Lori, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I promise. Christopher pulled out the ring, but before he could speak, Tiffany held up a hand. Wait. Christopher froze. Tiffany turned to Lori. I need to ask you something too. Lori's breath caught. Can I love your dad? Tiffany said gently. And still honor your mom? The room went silent. Lori looked at her father, then at Tiffany, then down at her hands, and then, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, she said the two words that changed everything. Please, do. Tiffany broke. She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. Christopher's eyes burned. He looked at Tiffany, his voice steady now. Will you marry me? Tiffany nodded, unable to speak. Yes. Yes. Christopher slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, and Tiffany threw her arms around him, holding on like she'd never let go. Lori stood off to the side, watching them, smiling through her tears. And then Tiffany pulled back. She looked at Lori and held out her hand. Lori hesitated, just for a second. Then she stepped forward and took it. No big speech, no grand gesture. Just a 12-year-old girl, reaching for someone who'd promised to stay. And this time, Lori believed her. If you've ever been afraid to love again, or if you know what it's like to protect the people you care about, this story was for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul Story. We'll see you in the next one.